In this video, we're going to take a trip back to late 1996, and I'm going to talk about my very first Macintosh, a Performa 6116CD. What is happening, guys? Todd here. If you remember a couple months ago, I released a video talking about my brother and I adventure in getting a Amiga 2000. It was 96. This video is kind of a continuation of that video. You can think of this as part 2 of that video. And in this video, we'll talk about my first Macintosh. The other one, the Mica, wasn't our first Mica, but this was my first Macintosh. So it was fall of '96. It was probably very late summer, mid-August. It was back to school time. And like I said, in the last video, I was in between college and trying to figure out what to do. So I needed to get a job, generate some cash. So I started working. I went up and applied and got a job at my OfficeMax. And for you guys that are living outside the US and aren't familiar with what OfficeMax is, it's an office supply store. You go down and buy your copier paper, pens, pencils, notepads, office furniture, of course computers, and stuff like that. So I got a job working there, and the job was working with the supplies, like paper and pencils and stuff like that, notepads, furniture. I didn't work in computers. I at the time I had a passing interest in computers. I of course own computers, but as far as like selling them, working with them in a retail environment, it wasn't something I was hugely interested in. So as I worked there for the first couple of weeks, I kept noticing in the back, whenever you walked back through the store, you went back through the doors that went into the back of the store, into the inventory room where like you kept like the furniture and you kept like the excess supplies and your receiving dock and stuff like that. Back in that area of the store, there was near the break room and the employee restrooms, there was a D&D cage, which was a like damage and destroy. Basically, it was like maybe a medium-sized bedroom in size, just a steel cage with a wire steel cage with a locked door on it. And we would store back here any kind of returns from customers or things that got damaged in the store. Like say if something got dropped and it had to be, it gets secured in there, so it had somewhere safe to be secured. Anytime somebody would return something that didn't sound like it worked, it'd go in there. And what would happen was we would fax over an invoice. After so much product got built up, we'd send fax over an invoice, or through some other means contact the vendor or distributor to say, hey, we've got XYZ products that need to be returned, and we want to get credit for them. And usually what happens is either we ship it back to them, like put it all on a pallet, and off it goes back to them, and then they give it credit to us, or you destroy it in the field, take it out back with a hammer, destroy it, throw it in the dumpster, and you get credit for it. And this happened with a lot of products. However, when it came to computers, those were usually handled a little differently. Usually those got shipped back to the vendor. They'd obviously want those back. But I kept noticing when I walked past this cage, which it was packed full. It was like a Hoarders, like an episode of Hoarders. There was just stuff just sky high in this cage. But I kept noticing when I walked by it, Apple Macintosh box, it was kind of sticking up out of everything else. It was because those. If you've ever seen those boxes that those Performas from that era, from the mid-90s shipped in, they shipped in these boxes that were like 3 foot tall, because there was a computer and a monitor in that box. So you had like a pizza box computer, and then on top of it you had like a 14 or 15 inch monitor. So the box was the box was quite tall. But I kept walking by the cage and kept wondering about this Macintosh that was in there. I didn't really have any experience with Macintosh. My limit of my experience was anytime I'd see like an interactive machine on a display at a store, like if you go into a Sears and they'd have a Macintosh on a computer setup with the other computers, and there'd be like usually like an encyclopedia or some sort of interactive CD-ROM thing going on, something like that. So that was pretty much the extent of my experience with them. I used Apple IIs when I was in school, in like elementary, junior high, high school. I had experience with Apple IIs, but as far as actual Macintoshes, I hadn't had any real experience with them. So I kept seeing this machine back there, and I kept getting curious, and I ended up asking the store manager, saying, hey, what's the story on this? Is this something that's for sale? And usually whenever those things are sitting back there, they're not for sale, because like I said earlier, they contact the vendor and whoop, off they go. They couldn't get rid of it. They couldn't get authorization to return it to the vendor. So they were stuck with it. It was dead inventory sitting back there. They didn't want to destroy it because they thought maybe down the road they would get permission to return it for credit. So it was stuck in just stuck in inventory, stuck in limbo, stuck in a black hole. It was just stuck in this cage, just taking up space. And none of the other people who worked there had any interest in Apple whatsoever. So I was curious. I was like, hey, is it something you guys consider selling, since it's been sitting back here for a while? Because the Performa 6116CD was introduced in the summer of '95, discontinued in the summer of, I think it was summer of '96. So, a few months after I started working there, it'd been discontinued a few months before I started working there. And this machine originally, in the summer of '95 when it was introduced, it was retail for, I believe it was like $2,000, $1,900, $2,000, something like that. It was a computer with keyboard and mouse that came with like I think it was an Apple 14-inch color monitor. So it wasn't dirt cheap, which at the time that was pretty par for the course for machines like that. And so I had him, get it out of the cage, and it was like, does it work? So we, hooked it up and tested out, hooked the monitor up, keyboard and mouse, and lo and behold, the machine booted up. It worked just fine. There was no problems with it whatsoever. We played around with it, tested and some, it was like, hey, the machine works just fine. So I asked him, is this something you guys would consider selling? He's like, yeah, sure. This is dead inventory. We can't send it back to get credit for it. And if we can get anything out of it, it'd be great. So we went over to the computer system, looked up the inventory, found a price on it. I asked him, what can you sell for? I was expecting, cause since this was such an expensive machine, I was expecting, him to come back and say, this is gonna be like $1,000, $1,200, $1,500. I expected it to be expensive, and I didn't have that kind of money at the time. Which I didn't have that kind of free money at the time. And he came back to me with a price. I want to say I ended up buying that machine, whole machine in the box. This was like in pristine condition. It was the complete Performa 6116CD package. For I want to say like $80 or $100. It was somewhere around $100 I bought this machine for, and you couldn't buy that machine nowadays for that price. No, you couldn't buy a used, beat up, broken one looked like it was dragged down a street behind a car for that kind of price. So it was amazing at the time. The machine had been discontinued just a few months earlier, and apparently they dropped it like a rock. It was discontinued, price, they blew it out. However, this store had one sitting back here in their D&D cage that they couldn't get rid of. It was stuck in limbo. So of course I bought the machine. I was like, oh hell yeah, buy this, because I was still rocking my main computer home was still my 486, my AST 486. I'd had that for like two years or so, and I was itching to do something different. So I bought this Macintosh, took it home, and started tinkering with it. It came with a modem. It came with this crappy Geoport modem, which I ended up replacing right away with an actual like a US Robotics, like a 2880 or 56K modem. So much better experience in that crappy Geoport modem that was included with the little external modem that's included with it. So, over the course of a couple years, I ended up having this machine for probably, before I ended up upgrading off of it, I probably had it for 1 or 2 years. I don't know exactly how long I had it. I don't recall it. I'd have to sit down, crunch the numbers, try to see if I could figure out exactly how long I had it, but I had this machine for a year or two. And I had a lot of great fun with this machine. To give you a basic idea what the specs on it were, it was the Performa 6116CD, which was the consumer version of the Apple Mac 6100, which was the very first Power Mac. It was the very first PowerPC Mac, first Power Mac in the series, and it had a 60 megahertz PowerPC 601 processor. It had 8 megabytes of RAM soldered to the motherboard, and there was still, I think, 2 slots on the motherboard to add extra memory to it. It had 14-inch display. It had a 700 megabyte SCSI hard drive, a dual-speed SCSI CD-ROM. This was a complete SCSI machine. It wasn't like the cheaper, later Performa machines that were kind of nerfed, where they put in crappy IDE and other low-end parts. No, this was simply a Power Mac 6100 with a monitor and some beefed up specs. It came with a bigger hard drive and I think a CD-ROM, whereas the Power Mac didn't come standard with a CD-ROM. But anyways, so I'm using the machine at home, and throughout the course of the first couple weeks I owned it, I reinstalled that operating system. I couldn't tell you how many times. I didn't know anything about Mac OS, so I was constantly screwing something up, and I didn't know how to fix it. And I didn't really have anybody to go to. I didn't have my Mac guy. I could talk to a buddy that was a Mac guy. I didn't know anybody owned Macs. I didn't think I knew. I ended up later on, I'll get to that in a minute, but I didn't know anybody immediately that had anything Mac knowledge. So when I screw something up, I ended up pulling the disk back out and reinstalling the operating system. And another guy that ended up starting working there with me, he come to find out he was a bit of an Apple guy, and he knew another guy that was a kind of a common acquaintance for us that also was an Apple guy. So I ended up meeting up with this guy at his house, and actually it was in the previous story, it was the guy that my brother had got some Amiga stuff off of that I'd mentioned that had transitioned to our Mac. Well, that same guy, he had a whole bunch of Apple stuff, and he had software and stuff like that. So I remember taking, when I first bought it, I remember taking my Performa with me, monitor and everything, up to his house, and he did copying software on the floppy for me, and I didn't, import in my machine because I didn't have any software for it or anything like that. Games, anything. I didn't have music software. I didn't have anything for the machine, and so he ended up giving me a bunch of software to install on the machine. And it didn't take long to realize that while the 700 meg hard drive in the machine was pretty spacious, it was still nice to have extra storage. So to deal with the lack of storage on the built-in, the 700 meg SCSI hard drive was pretty adequate storage, but I could definitely use some more storage. So I ended up buying a SCSI zip drive, external 100 megabyte, SCSI zip. Had a ton of disk with it. I would download things and put it on zip disk, and it was a great experience. It was a great removable media at the time. It was, I don't want to say it was zip disks were reliable because in the end they weren't reliable, but at the time it was a reliable medium. And I remember I had a buddy that had a PC that he had a parallel port zip drive, and oh my God, it was so slow compared to the SCSI on my Mac. It was terrible how much slower that was than the SCSI drive. So with that machine, I ended up doing multiple upgrades to it over the time I had it. I ended up installing more RAM. Since I had only 8 megabytes on the motherboard, I think I installed another pair of 8s, so I had a total of 24 megabytes of RAM. There was a little clip-on oscillator fix that you basically, on the motherboard, you clip on this little chip that would go over top the oscillator crystal, and it would boost the processor speed up. So instead of running at 60 megahertz, the machine now ran at 66 or 72 or whatever the clock speed was. It boosted the bus speed up to allow the processor to run at faster speed. But yeah, that's where my interest with Apple started. It was 22 years ago when I bought that little Performa 6116 computer and brought it home, and I just fell in love with the Macintosh. It was simple to use, but very powerful. It's power lied in its simplicity. It wasn't like Atari ST tossed simple to the point where it was super limiting, but it was a very interesting machine, and it fueled my passion for Apple. And I ended up replacing that machine after a year or two with a UMax clone. For you guys that were around back at the time, there was when Apple was still allowing clone competitors like Power Computing, UMax, Motorola. There was probably a few others that came and gone, but the UMax was a pretty interesting machine, but maybe I'll talk about that in another video. But yeah, that's where my interest in Apple started, and I still think to this day that Apple computers are some of the best computers for content creators. I don't necessarily agree with everything that they're doing now with Tim Cook's direction he's taken Apple, but I still feel that their machines and their operating system and their software, how everything kind of seamlessly works together, and how the whole ecosystem works with each other. I still think some of the best computers on the market, and especially for content creators. If you're a video gamer, nah, no bueno. But if you're a content creator, they're solid machines. But yeah, that's where I started with Apple Macintosh computers, and I would absolutely love to get another one of those 6116 CDs or 6115, same basic machine, slightly different hard drive, or a PowerMax 6100. So if any of the guys that are watching this video, if you guys have PowerMax 6100 or Performa 6116 CD and you want to sell it, yeah, give me a shout out, because I'd definitely be interested in buying it, because I've been keeping my eyes on eBay for a while now, and every once in a while one pops up, but they're usually in really, really rough condition. I don't mind buying something that requires a little TLC, but if it looks like it's been literally dragged down the street behind a car and beat up all to hell, I'm not terribly interested in that. Well guys, I think that about wraps up for this video. I know it wasn't one of the most interesting videos ever posted, but for me it's my personal origin. This was my origin story for Macintosh. This is where it began for me with a Mac. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you. So yeah, if you thought it was cool, give me a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to hit the bell icon, and hopefully YouTube God's providing, you'll be notified when I post new content. And leave a comment down below. Yeah, if you're a Mac guy, what was your origin? Where did it start for you? What kicked it off for you? What was your first machine? Was it something maybe your parents bought for you? Maybe something you bought for yourself, or a hand-me-down, or in my case, something you picked up dirt cheap and wasn't expecting to, but you did, and you ended up falling in love with it? Yeah, let us know. I'd like to hear down in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video.